The U.S. cavalry had rifles, forts, and numbers, but they couldn't stop warriors who vanished into the plains. The Comanche fired 20 arrows in 30 seconds, stole 500 horses overnight, and used the moon to orchestrate slaughter. By 1850, one tribe had more horses than the U.S. Army. Stay with me, because their secrets were too wild to record. Chapter 1. Could they really fire 20 arrows in 30 seconds while galloping backward? They weren't soldiers. They were shadows with bows. And what they could do on horseback made even the U.S. cavalry freeze in disbelief. Imagine a warrior not just riding full speed, but turning sideways, hugging the side of his horse, and launching arrow after arrow while using the horse's body as a shield. That's exactly how the Comanche fought. Their rate of fire? Up to 20 arrows in 30 seconds, faster than a musket could reload even once. U.S. Army scouts noted this during the Red River War of 1874, when entire companies were ambushed by mounted Comanches who never stopped moving. The warriors carried compact, sinew-backed bows made of Osage orange wood, reinforced with bison horn. These weren't long-range weapons, but they were deadly accurate at less than 50 yards and lethal in swarms. Comanche boys began riding by age 5 and were expected to be expert horsemen before puberty. By age 12, many were already raiding. Their training was brutal, relentless, and started with live animal targeting. Young warriors learned to shoot rabbits from horseback without slowing down. This created warriors who could deliver precision shots mid-sprint with terrifying consistency. British artist George Catlin, who spent years among the Plains tribes in the 1830s, called them the finest light cavalry in the world. He even compared them to Mongols and Cossacks, writing, "No nation on earth can equal them in horsemanship." They didn't just ride horses, they became horses, silent, deadly, and impossible to predict. And in the next chapter, we'll see what happened when they struck under moonlight, and no one even knew they were there. Chapter 2. Why did the U.S. fear the full moon? The rise of the Comanche moon. It wasn't superstition, it was strategy. On the southern plains, when the full moon rose, settlers, soldiers, and scouts all said the same chilling words. It's a Comanche moon. For the Comanche, moonlight wasn't just helpful, it was a weapon. Under the glow of a full moon, they could ride for miles without torches, plan silent raids, and disappear before sunrise. Between 1830 and 1870, dozens of attacks across Texas, New Mexico, and northern Mexico occurred like clockwork, every 29.5 days under lunar clarity. The U.S. Army noted this in dispatches. One chilling report from Fort Parker, Texas, 1836, read, "They came in silence, under the moonlight. By dawn, the station was ash." During one Comanche moon in 1840, Chief Buffalo Hump led over 500 warriors in what became one of the deadliest raids in U.S. history, known as the Great Raid of 1840. They covered nearly 1,000 miles, looted 2 towns, captured dozens, and returned with 3,000 horses, with almost no losses. Why was it so effective? Their horses, smaller, agile Mustangs, were trained for night riding. Their warriors used owl calls as signals, and their face paint included phosphorescent minerals to confuse and disorient enemies in low light. It wasn't ritual, it was psychological warfare. By 1855, Texas Ranger units started organizing moon patrols, and one officer admitted, "We don't guard by night, we guard by moon." The Comanche turned the most predictable phase of nature into a predictable phase of fear. And if that sent a chill down your spine, wait until you see what they did with children they captured during these raids. That's what I'll show you next. Chapter 3. Why did the Comanche adopt white children and raise them as their own? Some were taken during moonlit raids. Others vanished from wagons, cabins, and even church services. But what shocked settlers most wasn't that the Comanche kidnapped children. It was what they did next. Unlike other tribes who used captives as slaves or ransomed them, the Comanche often adopted white children, raised them not as outsiders, but as blood. One of the most famous cases? Cynthia Ann Parker, taken during the 1836 raid on Fort Parker, Texas, at age 9. By 17, she married Chief Peta Nocona and gave birth to Quanah Parker. who later became the last great Comanche war chief. Cynthia's story stunned Americans. When Texas Rangers rescued her in 1860, she begged to return to her Comanche family. She never readjusted to white society. She died in 1871, reportedly from starvation and heartbreak. But why did this happen? Comanche tribes had suffered massive population losses from smallpox, 1,780 to 1,830, reducing some bands by 60 to 70%. By integrating captives, they rebuilt numbers and kept warrior bloodlines alive. But this wasn't just about survival, it was cultural. The Comanche believed courage, skill, and strength mattered more than race. By 1850, U.S. Army records estimated over 300 white and Mexican children were living with the Comanche. Some became full warriors, some never left. Ranger Jack Hayes once said, "Those boys are Comanche now. They ain't ever coming back." To the U.S. military, this was unthinkable, but to the Comanche, it was a tactical and spiritual merging. And in the next chapter, you'll find out how these same warriors used fire, not as destruction, but as a battlefield GPS, smokescreen, and panic machine. Stay close, because it's about to get wild. Chapter 4. How did the Comanche weaponize fire without burning themselves? They didn't just fight with bows and lances. They used the wind, the earth, and fire itself as part of their battle strategy. And the U.S. Army had no answer for it. The Comanche mastered controlled grassland fires, a tactic so precise it was often mistaken for weather until it was too late. They'd set dry prairie brush ablaze behind them during retreat, confusing cavalry horses and choking enemy troops with smoke. When the wind shifted, flames would circle the pursuing unit, cutting off supply wagons and creating chaos in minutes. During the Battle of Plum Creek in 1840, retreating Comanches lit a fire line across 200 acres, effectively blinding mounted rangers and forcing a full stop. Survivors later said it was like riding through a moving wall of ash. But the most terrifying use came during the Great Raid of 1840. After looting Victoria and Linville, they torched hayfields and corrals, driving U.S. forces into narrow, smoke-filled choke points. This allowed 500 Comanche to escape with over 3,000 horses, losing fewer than 12 warriors. They also used smoke as communication. 3 spirals rising from a bluff. That meant reinforcements were en route. A single smoke column drifting low and wide, that signaled enemy cavalry in motion. Spanish records from the 1770s even described this, noting Comanches used fuego y humo to coordinate raids across distances of 20 leagues or more. General William Tecumseh Sherman, who later fought them in the 1860s, admitted, "We chased them through clouds of our own fear." Fire was their message, and it said, "Stay out." But the most bizarre weapon wasn't fire. It was sound. Screams, whistles, and war cries so terrifying, they made seasoned soldiers drop rifles and run. And that's what I'll tell you next, if you're ready for it. Chapter 5. What did the Comanche war cry sound like, and why did it break men's nerves? It wasn't just a yell, it was a sonic weapon. To the U.S. military, it sounded like hell had opened its gates. To the Comanche, it was the beginning of psychological warfare. The Comanche war cry wasn't a single note. It was a mix of animal mimicry, guttural shrieks, falsetto howls, and bone-rattling whistles. Warriors trained for years to perfect it. According to ethnographer James Mooney in the 1890s, Comanche boys as young as 8 practiced war cries in the dark to terrify rival camps. One officer described it as, like 100 panthers screaming from every direction, it gets under your skin. And that was the point. During the Battle of Adobe Walls in 1874, Quanah Parker's war party of over 250 warriors let out a shriek just before charging. The sudden sonic blast caused buffalo hunters to fumble their rifles, some even misfiring or ducking under wagons. Though the Comanche lost that battle, their sound assault created enough disarray to allow retreat with minimal losses. The U.S. Army even issued mental resilience training for frontier troops to withstand Comanche auditory tactics. Yet in several recorded cases from the 1850s and 60s, entire platoons panicked at the sound, abandoning posts without engagement. One diary from Lieutenant Silas Warren during the 1858 Wichita campaign reads, They screamed like they were already in your soul. I thought I'd gone mad. In some raids, the Comanche carried ceremonial whistles carved from eagle bones, producing eerie, high-pitched tones that mimicked spirits or birds of prey. They believed it summoned ancestral energy, but to U.S. soldiers, it was otherworldly. And that's just one of their non-lethal weapons. Next up, we look at how they used horses like tanks, each trained to turn, stop, and even fall on command during battle. You've never seen cavalry like this, and that's coming up next. Chapter 6. How did the Comanche turn horses into living war machines? To understand why the U.S. Army feared the Comanche so deeply, you have to look at their horses. These weren't just mounts. They were custom-trained weapons, and no other tribe in North America came close. By the 1700s, after Spanish horses escaped or were traded north, the Comanche became the first Plains tribe to fully adopt the horse culture, transforming themselves from foot-bound hunters to the most feared light cavalry on the continent. By 1800, it's estimated they controlled over 30,000 square miles of prime horse country. Their secret: breeding, training, and bonding. Comanche boys learned to ride by age 4, often tied to the horse by rawhide to prevent falling. By age 10, they could shoot arrows under the horse's neck at full gallop. Unlike U.S. soldiers who dismounted to reload rifles, Comanches could loose 6 arrows in under 10 seconds, all while hanging sideways from a horse using only their knees. Army Colonel Richard Irving Dodge once admitted, "A Comanche warrior and his horse moved as one, fluid, fast, and deadly. Our cavalry looked clumsy by comparison." They also trained horses to fall on cue for sudden ambushes, pivot sharply to dodge bullets, and even play it dead during strategic retreats. When the U.S. Army sent their best mounted units to pursue Comanche raiders in 1854, the soldiers were stunned. Not a single warrior dismounted during a 12-mile running battle. Some accounts suggest the Comanche could change horses mid-gallop, vaulting from one to another using sheer thigh strength. By the 1850s, U.S. military reports classified the Comanche as unmatched in mounted combat, and Texas Rangers often warned new recruits, "If you see their horses first, it's already too late." But horses weren't the end of it. Next, I'll show you how Comanche shamans used hallucinogens and weather rituals to bend the battlefield to their will, and some generals believed it actually worked. Stick with me. It's wild. Chapter 7. Did Comanche shamans really control the weather in battle? It sounds like myth. Warriors summoning storms to blind their enemies. But U.S. scouts in the 1800s wrote it down as real, and the Comanche believed it was real too. Comanche shamans, or puha men, were more than spiritual leaders. They were battlefield assets. Before raids or defensive campaigns, they performed weather ceremonies invoking lightning, wind, and clouds. Many of these rituals used a mix of hallucinogens, sacred chants, and animal relics, especially eagle feathers and buffalo hearts. By the mid-1800s, these ceremonies became so feared that Colonel Ranald S. Mackenzie requested weather reports before launching major offensives into Comancheria. Why? Because historically, Comanche ambushes often coincided with sudden dust storms or lightning strikes, especially in spring and late summer. During the Battle of North Fork, 1869, Army scouts noted how a storm suddenly rolled in during a Comanche flanking maneuver. It grounded the U.S. riflemen, blurred line of sight, and allowed nearly 100 warriors to escape across the Canadian River. In an after-action report, Captain Henry Pope wrote, "The clouds themselves seemed to obey them. We lost men to confusion, not bullets." But there was more than just ceremony. Comanche shamans also consumed Datura stramonium, known as devil's weed, to enter trance states. Under its influence, they claimed to see enemy troop movements days before they happened. Sometimes they'd mark enemy paths with stones or feathers, right before a major ambush. Anthropologist John C. Ewers documented in 1955 that over 60% of surviving Comanche veterans credited spirit talkers with accurate battle predictions. Whether placebo or precision, the Army took it seriously. So did their enemies. But what if the most feared Comanche tactic wasn't mystical at all? Up next, how they used hostage-taking not just for leverage, but for long-term psychological warfare that broke entire settlements. What happened to those captives will chill you. Chapter 8. Why did the Comanche take hostages, and what did they really do with them? The Comanche didn't just raid for loot, they raided for humans, and not just for ransom. Hostage-taking was a weapon, a tool, and sometimes a sentence worse than death. By the 1830s, Anglo settlers in Texas lived in constant fear of Comanche raids. But it wasn't the scalping or the torching of homesteads that haunted them most. It was the disappearances. Between 1836 and 1875, estimates suggest that over 500 white settlers and Mexican civilians were taken captive by the Comanche, often during lightning-fast raids on isolated ranches and frontier towns. But here's what made Comanche hostage tactics so shocking. They didn't just ransom them back. If the captive was young and adaptable, especially children under 10, the Comanche often adopted them into their tribe, renaming them, teaching them the language, and raising them as warriors or wives. In fact, some captives refused to return when rescued. The most famous case? Cynthia Ann Parker, taken in 1836 at age 9, who fully assimilated and later became the mother of Quanah Parker, the last great Comanche war chief. But not all fates were kind. Adult captives were often traded, bartered, or used as tools of psychological warfare. Settlements would receive burned clothing or severed fingers of captives to instill terror and delay rescue attempts. Some captives were tortured slowly as revenge for military action. Others were kept alive for years, then paraded before enemy towns to show Comanche power. In 1840, after the Council House fight in San Antonio, where Texas officials tried to ambush a Comanche delegation, hostage retaliation escalated. Comanche war bands killed over 30 civilians and captured dozens, launching what became known as the Great Raid of 1840, which struck as far east as Linville, the second largest port in Texas at the time. Their message was clear: try diplomacy, lose your towns; spill Comanche blood, lose your people. And if you think that's harsh, wait until you hear how they use decoys, false retreats, and even their own dead to win battles. That's up next, and it's shocking. Chapter 9. How did the Comanche use fake retreats and their own dead as weapons? Most armies avoided dragging corpses into battle. The Comanche? Sometimes they counted on them. Their ambush tactics weren't just brutal, they were psychological warfare perfected over centuries. One of their most terrifying tricks was the false retreat, a tactic that U.S. generals never fully adapted to. During raids or open battles, a group of Comanche warriors would charge, fire arrows, and then seemingly panic and retreat. Young green American troops would often break formation to chase them, thinking the warriors were fleeing in fear. But as they rushed forward, they'd hit a kill zone, a hidden semicircle of mounted Comanche behind hills, rocks, or in grass cover. Once surrounded, it was a slaughter. A report from 1848 during the Indian Wars in Texas noted, "The Comanche do not run, they draw. And when you take the bait, you are lost." Another unsettling tactic involved the placement of their dead. After battles, they sometimes propped corpses upright, placing weapons in their hands or mounting them on horses. From a distance, they looked like reinforcements. It bought the Comanche time, delayed pursuit, or scared enemies into abandoning chase. In one 1852 skirmish near the Llano Estacado, scouts claimed they counted 20 Comanche guarding a ridge. But when they advanced, they found half were corpses propped with sticks and stuffed with leaves. That delay allowed the real war party to escape east into New Mexico. And here's the strange part. These weren't desperate tricks. They were coded into Comanche war society. Their warriors earned honors, coups, not just for kills, but for trickery, retrieving weapons, and even touching a live enemy without killing them. To them, war wasn't just survival, it was art, and deception was part of the masterpiece. But next up, we dig into the final act, the one tactic the US government labeled unforgivable. What the Comanche did in post-battle rituals stunned even their allies. Chapter 10. What were the Comanche's most feared post-battle rituals? After the fighting ended, the Comanche didn't simply ride off victorious. That's when their darkest rituals began, and when fear truly set in. One of the most disturbing practices was the ritual mutilation of enemy corpses. Comanche warriors believed that mutilating a fallen enemy could trap their spirit, preventing them from entering the afterlife or seeking revenge. This wasn't random violence. It was spiritual warfare, rooted in centuries of cosmology and cultural belief. The most infamous example, the Buffalo Hump-led raids of the 1840s. After the Great Raid of 1840, settlers found mutilated bodies outside of Linville, with ears removed, genitals severed, and eyes gouged out. These acts weren't done in haste. They were ceremonial, sometimes done to the rhythm of war chants. And it didn't stop there. Certain warriors, especially war chiefs and spirit riders, engaged in scalp dances, wearing the fresh scalps of enemies during firelit celebrations. Scalp dances served a dual purpose: to honor the dead and to intimidate the living. Settlers who witnessed these rituals from afar often described them as hellish or inhuman. According to military archives, the U.S. Army recovered over 160 scalps from a Comanche camp near the Red River in 1858, many of them believed to be from Mexican villagers and Texas Rangers. The rituals could also be bizarrely artistic. Comanche would paint skulls, decorate bone fragments, and hang enemy weapons in trees as spiritual trophies. In some rare cases, captured heads were preserved in buffalo hide containers, stored as sacred war relics. But perhaps the most chilling of all was the reverse naming ceremony, where Comanche warriors gave mocking names to enemies they killed, such as Whimpers at Fire or Cried for Horse. These names lived on in tribal stories for generations. To the Comanche, the battle didn't end with death. It ended when your name, body, and spirit had been conquered. If these tactics blew your mind, hit subscribe to uncover even more native war legends. And don't miss our last video, 12 Cherokee Mysteries Buried by History.